All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a very special edition of the Lucha Central Weekly podcast in English. This week, we're going to be doing, well, something a little different. We are recording on a different format, on a different day. So we're very excited to see you. Yes, as Brendan's pointing out, you get to see these faces all for free. And we have a very special guest joining us this week. But before we go into it, let me bring in my two co-hosts, Brendan Barr and Dashing Dusty Murphy. Gentlemen, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
I'm doing good.
Good.
I was just going to say, big weekend for wrestling. So I'm all kinds of excited. And I get to be here.
Yes. No, you're right. Very, very big weekend. And we'll be watching that later. And definitely we'll be sharing our thoughts on what's happening at Survivor Series in a future episode of the Lucha Central Weekly podcast. But this week we have a different topic, something I think you don't really get to hear about in Lucha Libre. So with that, we got to bring one of the biggest Lucha Libre experts of all of LuchaCentral.com, of all really the internet, Jerrry Villagrana, from the Photo Versus video cast, Lucha Libre photographer, avid fan, videocaster, podcaster with LuchaCentral.com. We are thrilled to have you join us again. Welcome, Jerry.
And a new officer at Masked Republic.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That's the office
Moving
job.
on up.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited to be here. It's always a good time talking about Lucha, and it's an exciting time. So, Thanks for having me.
Yes. How have you been? Yeah. I mean, real quick, you've been promoted into a new role at Masked Republic, and you are still continuously working on your video cast. I know you have a lot of projects going on, but how have you been doing?
Doing good. We have a new cookbook coming out. That was a big project. The cookbook was a lot of fun. I got a chance to take a look at that, and it's like over 300 pages of just awesome pictures and food, recipes. I got to share a couple recipes in there of stuff that I grew up with. And we have people from Mexico, all over Mexico, that shared their recipes. They're really. It was quite a project because we had people submitting recipes. From the wrestlers, and they also cook their favorite dishes, so you're getting stuff that's the stuff that the wrestlers are actually eating and they prepare for themselves and their families. So that kept us real busy. So it's been, I know things are kind of slow with Lucha in terms of new shows and stuff because of the pandemic, but fun projects like that are have kept us busy, and it's been a lot of fun, so we can't wait to get that out to everybody.
Yes, congratulations on the cookbook. We heard a little bit about that during the virtual Expo Lucha back in October, and that was just really cool. I think it's a cool way to bring the world and spirit of Lucha Libre to a wider audience, while also doing something that most people love to do, and that's eat. So those are literally two of my favorite things to do: watch wrestling, Lucha Libre, and eat. So
I feel called out by this.
Yes. Putting these two things together is a dream come true for lots of fans, but too the photography involved in it too. I mean, must have been amazing, and just the whole project and collaborating with all of the luchadors and getting that perspective too on wrestling and food from their insights must be very cool. So we are very, very excited. The cookbook is going to be dropping next year, correct? 2021?
Yep, next year.
Great. So everyone keep an eye out for that. You can't get it now, but 2021, it's going to be a year full of hopes and promises. Hopefully that they don't all get shattered. If this cookbook does not come out in 2021, I'm going to be really devastated because we've already lived such a long year in 2020 that literally is a silver lining in 2021, just getting us through the rest of the year to get to the next phase. But yes, so I mentioned that this week for the Lucha Central Weekly podcast, we're going to be doing a different format. Typically, we present you all of the latest and greatest news happening in the world of Lucha Libre, reviewing what's happened in the week, and also previewing what's to come ahead, covering top Mexico-based promotions, independents, and the luchador scene in WWE, AEW, MLW, Ring of Honor. so on and so forth. But this was actually an idea that Jerry had given us quite some time ago, and we've been really wanting to do this, especially because it is not a typical format for a Lucha Libre podcast. And you'll see why in a second. But this is going to allow us to more share our personal insights and thoughts on Lucha Libre, the history of Lucha Libre, the importance of people in it. And you do that by a pretty typical way fans assess who is the best. And that is, who is your Mount Rushmore? I literally facilitated a FAQ yesterday where that was asked, and it brought a smile to my face, because that seems to be the standard. When you're assessing the best of the best, who needs to be recognized in the panels of history, it is, who is your Mount Rushmore? And so I've never really heard of a format. Of course, everyone has their personal Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, female wrestlers, tag teams, managers, promoters, ring announcers, refs, everything that you've probably seen it of different promotions, whatever it is. But I have yet to really have heard a Mount Rushmore of Lucha Libre. So that is what we're going to break ground on today's show. Each one of us is going to be sharing our personal Mount Rushmore of Lucha Libre, letting you all know who's the four that we believe should be highlighted in the panels of history for all to know, and give an explanation as to why. Why did we pick these individuals? So I'm really excited about this. I know the team is excited about this, and we're super thrilled to have Jerry in this with us, because I think that as people are thinking about it just off the top of their head, there's definitely going to be some names that we'll probably all have, but I do think there's always going to be those one or two that either people didn't expect, or maybe people would argue with, or maybe think someone else should be there. But I think that's going to be what we'll dive into in just a quick second. So yes, here we go. This week's special edition of the Lucha Central Weekly podcast, and we're covering the Mount Rushmore of Lucha Libre. So, Jerry, you are our guest, and of course, this is the time of Thanksgiving. So, as a guest in our house of Lucha Libre, known as the Lucha Central Weekly podcast, I would offer that you could go first and kind of share your Mount Rushmore of Lucha Libre.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. And when I was thinking about it, I had three names come up that were like, absolutely, in my opinion, are the three. And those three people would be El Santo, I think, for what he did in Mexico with the movies. He was the Marvel Cinematic Universe before there was a Marvel Cinematic Universe. He was, as in case anybody doesn't know, you can look it up on YouTube, but there's these great movies of him wrestling against vampires and werewolves and witches, and you name the monster, they would take these inspirations from foreign films of foreign monsters, and then he'd go and he'd wrestle, and there'd be a battle. They'd always include a section of Lucha Libre, right? So that some people, I think a lot of people, most people, have only seen El Santo wrestle from the movie clips. Mm-hmm. But he was, those movie posters are all over the place. They're collectibles all over Mexico. So I think El Santo, for what he did, he used to drive a James Bond car. So they would take these great cinematic influences and they put them into El Santo movies. So he was your superhero James Bond, all rolled into one, right? So El Santo's got to be there. I think probably first and foremost, right? And then another guy you got to put on there. My number two was Rey Mysterio Jr. And that one's I was surprised to see that be a debate in a recent post that a Lucha page put up. People from Mexico were like, "Oh no, he's not one of the greatest. Like he's not one of the mountaintop of it." And I was like, "How can they think that?" But it's good because in Mexico, his effect isn't the highest, right? He didn't do all these things in Mexico. His impact is on an international scale, but it's so big in the way that he influenced other talent. You look at talent all over the world; they've all been influenced by what he did and his work. You look at WCW, where his match against Eddie Guerrero was the best match in WCW. I think it's pretty. I think it's in the conversation, if not clearly that match was the best match of of WCW, who had the best wrestlers. I mean, some of the best wrestlers, right? Like Ric Flair, you had at Chris Benoit, you had amazing talent. Yet his match against Eddie was the best match of the whole thing. The way that he mixed up his masks, which El Santo didn't do, right? So he did that. The way he mixed up his gear, the emphasis on gear was really important. So he was, he took it to Japan, and so that was, so yeah, the influence of Rey Mysterio internationally, I think, puts him at number 2. My number 3 is Mil Máscaras, because he did the whole mixing up the masks, the gear, prior to Rey, and he went to Japan, went to the U.S. You got Cornette talking about Mil Máscaras, and he wrestled in Madison Square Garden. So he had that international appeal too. So I think him. I think he's my number 3 in terms of, and then he also had the big effect in Mexico. He gets the love in Mexico. He gets the legend status in Mexico.
Absolutely.
He gets that within the country as well. And then from there, it's the 4th one is really debatable. The 4th one is really, a lot of people I think would put Blue Demon maybe because of the iconic mask, but I don't know that he doesn't get overshadowed by Santo. Like he's kind of in Santo's shadow. Exactly. And then you could go with Canek for what he did with the Cuatro Caminos. I think he'd be a good place there. But then there's other options, right? Because you could go with Místico for what he did. What people call the boom. When Lucha wasn't as big as it had been, and there was an empty space, and Místico kind of brought it all back, right?
Yeah.
Where he filled up the arenas that hadn't been full in a very long time. So I think those are some of the ones. I think those are some of the areas, but there's more out there. You could fill in that. You could fill in that fourth spot. I'm curious to see what you guys say. So my quick thoughts. Without taking up all the all the points. Would be those top 3, and then the 4th one kind of leaving it open to suggestion to see what you guys think.
Yeah, I like it.
I did say when we were planning this that's probably how it was going to go. Is most people would agree on 2 or 3 pretty strongly.
Absolutely.
I guess I'll just jump in with mine because we have a lot of overlap here. I did the same thing. I said El Santo is my number 1 pick for much of the same reasons. I mean, but he was you didn't even scratch the surface with, like, he also did the comic books. He influenced art. Like, he is just a cultural phenomenon that created the Lucha Libre phenomenon as well. I went for number 2, and for my number 2, I went with Eddie Guerrero instead, mostly because when he and Art Barr started working there, they were the ones that started bringing a lot of elements of the American style of storytelling in, which changed a lot of Lucha Libre at that point. And that's kind of the way I focused on my 4, is the people that had the biggest impact on Lucha Libre as a whole. So I thought that Eddie and had, in addition to being able to bring in that international spotlight, much in the way that Rey Mysterio did, I thought that he helped influence the way that the sport looks today, and it would be in a very different place if he hadn't done a lot of that work he did in the United States and then gone to Mexico. My number 3 was Rey Mysterio. Again, much of the same reasons. He changed the shape of Lucha Libre. He created the popularity internationally at this point, which is making people turn their eyes to Mexico when they're looking for new talent around the world, and put Mexico even further on the map as a legitimate source for professional wrestling that is unique, colorful, and distinct from everywhere else, and people need to see it. And then my 4th, because I was thinking again, how did people change the world? This was totally about that. I had mulled over many of the same things. I mulled over Canek, who defined an era, did a lot of great things. I because we were talking about change, I considered Conan, who also was part of that 90s change that really helped all of that, and then also went into producing down in Mexico, which has further influenced the storytelling. But instead I went with Antonio Pena for breaking off and creating AAA. Again, now we have two companies that can have very distinctly different storytelling types. And it was kind of a brave move at the time to do it, like to step away and do something different, and has created a lasting legacy. So that's those are my four and my logic behind it.
Yeah, we had a lot of overlap, you and I. I picked Santo because, like, he's the George Washington. He's the original guy, you know. And then, like, I did labor about Blue Demon versus Mil Mascaras, but ultimately I picked Mil Mascaras. He had more of an international presence. He could go to New York. He was the first wrestler that was allowed to wear a mask in Madison Square Garden. But he could go to New York and instantly be in the main event. He could go to Tokyo and instantly be in the main event. And he's still alive. That's huge. Like, regardless of his politics in wrestling, he's still alive. Like, this is a big deal. Somebody of his caliber and influence, like, he's the only one left of that original era, you know, when they were movie stars. He was only, you know, third to Santo and Blue Demon in movies, but still, like, he was a big deal. And Santo too, I didn't want to skip this. He was the guy that started the keeping your mask on all the time. Nobody ever sees you without your mask. That started with Santo. Yeah. He had a special mask so that he could eat, you know, with the mouth cut out. He would fly separately from everybody else on a different flight, different day. So nobody knew who he was. You know, it was a big deal. And so that's a big touch. And then my third was Eddie Guerrero. He had another huge international impact. He was Black Tiger in Japan. He, you know, came to WCW while he was in AAA, the La Parrilla del Terror. I mean, that was huge money. That was kind of what gave AAA the financial basis to take off the way they did, was this team. I mean, they brought people to the shows. And then when he went to America, like, he and Rey Mysterio together, they kind of revolutionized what the cruiserweights could be, what a luchador could be for a lot of Americans. You know, they kind of had a vague idea of luchadors or masked wrestling, but when they brought it to WCW, ECW first, then WCW, it legitimized it to a lot of people in a way that just hadn't been done before. And Eddie worked with everybody. You know, I mean, he wrestled the title match with CM Punk before CM Punk was famous, really. He, you know, I mean, he worked with everybody, and then he influenced everybody still that's important. You know, like Sasha Banks will talk about it. Andrade is obviously very influenced by Eddie. Yep. And so you see those echoes that are still felt today, and I think that's a very important piece of the Eddie Guerrero legacy, is his influence. And so he was my third. And then fourth, I kind of mentioned him already, but Rey Mysterio Jr., he had another huge international presence. He went to Japan. He came to America. He, like Mil Mascaras, he changed up the gear all the time. You hardly ever saw him in anything like you had seen him in before. It was always cool, but you always knew he was Rey Mysterio. And I feel like because of his placement in WWE, he's arguably the most famous luchador ever. I mean, so many, especially internationally, when people think of a luchador or even just a masked wrestler, they think of Rey Mysterio. And like, that's your first thought, because he's been seen, you know, he's like, even his current storyline on YouTube is the most popular storyline on WWE's YouTube.
By
like,
a good margin.
Yeah, it's had more total viewers than anything else. Even the Roman Reigns and everything, Rey Mysterio is still that popular. And so you just can't undersell his influence and his popularity. And I feel like because he's still active the way he is, that it's easier to discount his legacy, especially, you know, like in Mexico, because he did it on an international level. But as far as I know, he's wrestled in more, like, he's wrestled on all, you know, the 6 continents and over 40 countries. And I don't even think Mil Mascaras has wrestled as many places as Rey Mysterio has, thanks to that WWE placement. And so his popularity and influence in place has to be, you know, heavily considered. So he was my number 4.
Yeah, I think we all have a lot of the same people on here. I have a different iteration though, so I will be curious as to what your thoughts are on this, because I took a different spin a little bit with one of my picks. Well, actually 2 of my picks. because I think, just to reiterate, I mean, El Santo is the alpha, the origin almost of Lucha Libre, and also too that crossover appeal that we didn't really see in America until the Hulk Hogan's, until the Rocks. That's almost how Lucha, it was almost in reverse in Mexico, where that crossover appeal started on screen, and then the rise of the popularity in Lucha Libre happened afterward, or succinctly. And so that, you know, as being a part of the history of El Santo, but in everything that you all had mentioned, whether it was, you know, his presence in the communities, how he really altered how, you know, even just the dynamic of keeping your mask on at all times, the ultimate hero as well, you know, the big baby face, technical, how, you know, whatever word you want to use it, he is the godfather of that. It wouldn't be here today without him. So, and I think culturally too, I mean, his mask is what you think of when you think of Lucha Libre, you know, as far as the tradition and the history of it. But I have to agree too, another person that you think of when you think of masks is Rey Mysterio. I think he is that modern version. And Jerry makes a good point about probably people in Mexico not looking at Rey Mysterio's career as, you know, something worth being on the pinnacle, because a lot of that did happen in the United States. So it was so impactful in bringing an American audience to Lucha Libre, but I can absolutely see too why in Mexico it's not highly revered, because it may have not done a lot to bring audiences there. I think he's always a goodwill ambassador or representation of Lucha Libre around the world. But I also could absolutely see why on a more local scale and level, people are like, yeah, that's great, but actually there's other people that they think are a better representation of Lucha Libre within Mexico. And I think that could be where the big breakdown of whether he's on this or not could happen, is really your perspective on, you know, where are you coming from in Lucha Libre? And I think for us, as those who grew up in American audiences, he is someone that has represented that for years and has brought that to such a main stage and a wide scale, to the biggest wrestling company in the world, and has been that representative of Lucha Libre in WWE and WCW and even ECW. I mean, these much bigger promotions for many years. And that leaves a real lasting impact. Now, this is my spin on one of the picks. So I thought about this, and I knew a lot of people were going to pick Eddie Guerrero. And I thought, and there's so many Guerreros. There's so much of history within the Guerrero. So I wanted to actually take a step back and put Gory Guerrero on there, because I feel like we wouldn't have any of the Guerreros, Chavo and Mondo and Hector and Eddie without Gory. And also I think his influence on the moveset in Lucha Libre and the development of new wrestling moves that are still used to this day, that's incorporated as the basis in learning, you know, the technical aspect of wrestling, but also in Lucha Libre. And so, you know, for me, I thought when you're looking at the name Guerrero, instantly just, you know, takes you to, you know, whoever, especially Eddie, but to the history and the influence of the entire Guerrero family. And for me, just picking Eddie, I think, was going to be hard. Not because, you know, of all the things that have been said. I mean, we've talked about Eddie before, just recently, as just being someone that, as a wrestling fan, like his life and death has influenced wrestlers and fans, commentators, like everybody. And the fact that it really too was his spin on it in an American audience setting, but also taking a lot of what he's learned from his family and Mexican culture into this mainstream audience was amazing. But even just the history of the Guerreros and what they've done in training hundreds of people, that those people then went to go train on more. Like, I feel like that legacy and lineage. I think that too, lineage is such an important element in Lucha Libre, that I think when you think of family legacy, one of the biggest dynasties is the Guerreros. And so I wanted that also to kind of be a spin on family dynasties, because I feel like, even though we see that too with El Santo, even with the Mysterios, to me, I think the biggest wrestling dynasty of all time. And I know some people will say, what about the Hearts? So, that I think the most influential is the Guerreros.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. Yeah.
Well, based on the sheer number of people they trained, you'd be talking about the Hearts and the Guerreros, and I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I don't want people to come at me as far as saying, one is better than the other. That is not what I'm trying to say, everyone. I'm not trying to start an internet war between the Guerreros and the Hearts. This is not the McCoys and the Hatfields at all, but I'm just thinking that in the context of what we are discussing, to me, that just resonates and leaving a spot in there. And to say that Eddie's spot there too would be representative of, the Guerreros as well. But I think because the Cornerstone's gory, that that's what was my spin was going to be on this.
Yeah, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
And then the second spin I wanted to do on this, because I had also thought about Mil Máscaras, but then I wanted to do something a little different, and I wanted to explore, not that I'm well versed in this, so please, internet too, do not come at me, but one of the most comparable cultures in wrestling is the Japanese culture and how much that's tied into it. So I wanted to throw out there, and I'm leaning more towards one than the other, but I was wanting to throw in a Jushin Thunder Liger, or even Ultimo Dragon. I was leaning more through Jushin. I feel like with his lengthy career and presence, and really building that bridge between Lucha Libre and Japanese style wrestling, like that's profound. That's a profound relationship.
Is. And he trained in Mexico. He was too small to train in Japan, so he trained in Mexico. And he's just, I love Jushin Liger. And historically, he's very important for that kind of stuff. I mean, like he was, and Ultimo Dragon was at the same time, but like Jushin Liger's influence, I feel, is much bigger, especially on the international scale and the current scale. Jushin, people love Jushin Liger. He's still a commentator. I mean, he's still, very influential. And I think that was an excellent choice. He was my alternate. So
okay, see,
yeah. I knew you were going to be all in when you said Japan, because I'm like, Jushin Liger and Ultimo Dragon are two of his favorites. So
yes, I know. But I think Jerry opened the door. I mean, that fourth spot, I think there's those ones that, of course, like, and but when Jerry mentioned like that fourth one, I was like, I think we're all in that boat too. Like we all kind of had, of course, you had, the standards of Ray and of Santo and Mil and Eddie, but then depending too on what your perspective and you're looking at this from, your fandom, whether, again, I'm not as well versed with Japanese wrestling and even that relationship between Lucha Libre and Japan, but I know that one of the biggest tie-ins is Jushin Thunder Liger, and the fact that it's really built this bridge between these two cultures and these two styles of wrestling, way beyond the American style. And I think that those complement each other so well, and Jushin has just been such a amazing representative of that. And now too, I think in wrestling it's become more of a hybrid of different styles and different parts of the world. And I think that too was really the beginning of all of that, really that start of, hybrid styles of wrestling and movesets, that now it's become so much more blended, that at a time it was, a little bit less heard of.
So as we've gone, so now that we've all gone through our top, our Mount Rushmores, do you guys want to do a round of like who listening to one another? Is there anybody who you feel like you might have missed? Or because I know for me, in listening to what you guys said, I'm like, man, how did I not mention Conan? Right?
Yes, that's true. As soon as Brendan mentioned AAA, I was like, Conan.
Because like for me, what he brought, I should totally have added him to one of my alternates, because like he's such a huge impact on. He was one of the most like unselfish guys, in the sense that when he went somewhere, he brought people in too.
Exactly.
I'm great. Like, cool. Thanks for bringing me in. Thanks for flying me from way far away to Philadelphia to ECW or to wherever you're. But he was always like, if you guys like what I'm doing, you should see these guys and give them a chance too. And that's not always the case. And sometimes wrestling, and especially back then, could be like a selfish kind of business.
Yeah.
And we saw him, consistently bring in people that, could and did overshadow him, right? Like Ray Jr. or Penta and Phoenix and what he did for them. But there's a laundry list of great talent who can thank Conan for taking them to ECW, WCW, MLW, WWE, wherever he went, Lucha Underground. He was pulling people. He is huge.
Yeah, huge influence. It was a very tough choice on a couple of he could have fit in on a couple of my choices, but ultimately he was just an honorable mention at that. But a very high one. Like, I really wanted to find a way to fit him in on my. Can I cheat and have two people on one head? Is that what?
Then it's like, now you're just adding. Like, there's like maybe the top tier, and then you have like a bottom tier of faces. I don't know the logistics of how you add to Mount Rushmore, but.
Yeah, my honorable mention was just the whole Perros del Mal thing. They had Taya, they had Pedro Aguayo Jr., they had Pentagon, like, it was huge, and it was so big in the moment, and that's what kind of vaulted those guys to superstardom, and, that was kind of the beginning of all of that. I felt like that deserved a mention, too. That was a very ambitious thing, and it really turned out beautifully. An amazing faction, and sold a lot of merchandise, made a lot of money. That's always important too, because that's the kind of things that stick around. And so, I just thought that was very cool.
Bullet Club levels of merchandise movement.
Yes, that's a good point too. I think with the evolution of merchandising now becoming its own aspect of wrestling, and its own profit line, its own form of marketing, that too, I think that they kind of got to that level even like prior to Bullet Club. Like, that was pre-Bullet Club.
It was,
it was.
Yeah.
It's just an easy comparison for me to have made, because everybody knows that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's such a recognizable logo, such a recognizable group of guys, and Taya that came up together. And Taya is so important. She kind of needs an honorable mention in a way. She revolutionized a lot of that when she came into Lucha Underground. She wrestled the guys. I think she was seen as more legitimate than Sexy Star immediately, through the viewers. And so it was, her influence, I think, is going to loom large over women's wrestling in the future, and women's Lucha Libre in the future too.
Yeah.
But much like a Rey Mysterio, she's not telling that story yet. Which
Exactly.
Is part of the reason I hadn't thought of her in that area yet. But you're right. Miranda, I'm sorry I cut you off.
Oh, no. I was just going to say that's kind of a segue into kind of an honorable mention I was thinking about too. And it was the Apache family, and especially Lady Apache and Madi. I think that they've talking about being so influential in female wrestling and women's wrestling. But I think too, how story driven they've been, and kind of how they've really incorporated that family aspect. Of course, it's happened before, but I feel like the way that they've done that throughout their careers has been really, really special. And I think Lady Apache is really just that cornerstone of modern women's wrestling in Lucha Libre. And I think even same thing with Madi. I mean, their storytelling and what they've done in the ring and who they've worked with too is a sign of, if you work with them, you are going to be part of the future of Lucha Libre. And just I think that they've really played such a very important role in contributing to women's wrestling. And I mean, they haven't had as much of the international. I mean, they have, as far as being able to wrestle all over the world, maybe not as much visibility or kind of fans remembering them as much as I think they should. But I do feel like when you do talk about women's wrestling in Mexico, that family, and especially Apache and Madi, or Fabi and Madi, like those are the two I really think of and hold close and dear.
Well, to a point that you were getting at earlier with the Guerreros, though, the Apache family is responsible for training so many people in Mexico. And to the point that I have mentioned on the show at least once, that Lady Apache is one of the only female instructors in all of Mexico at this point. So that's how respected that name and that brand is, that she's able to kind of cut through a lot of that and still able to be a highly respected instructor.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So one thing that's interesting is that when you look at like the U.S. wrestling Mount Rushmore, they're all tied to promotions, right? Whether you're talking about Flair, Austin, Hogan, Rock, or whatever, they all made their names in promotions. Yet the names that we're speaking are not necessarily tied to CMLL or AAA, right? If you asked for, hey, who's the representative from CMLL to the Mount Rushmore, you probably go with Atlantis or with Negro Casas or somebody like that. If you went AAA, you'd have to go La Parca. Pretty much.
That's one I forgot. Oh gosh, now that's one too. I was like, damn, I should have had him on the list.
So it's interesting to me though that we've been having a conversation for like half an hour about the Mount Rushmore of Lucha, and really these guys aren't tied to any promotion for that long, unless you go with MLL, but they are independent kind of personalities.
Yeah.
Just one of the overall picks was tied to anything, and that was because I wanted to represent that having two major promotions now was a big deal. But you're. I think the way that Lucha works is so much different that it's people want to watch Lucha. They don't care about the brand. They care about what the product looks like. So it's not the same as here in the United States, where the brands went to war and one of them actually won. And now we talk about, so it's a very interesting point. You're right that it's so different that we could talk about these guys who and if you look at the records of all of these guys, you're to the point with Conan. He worked everywhere. He didn't just do one promotion. He was everywhere. Rey Mysterio was everywhere. Everybody doesn't really have a brand that they represent. I mean, arguably, I guess Rey Mysterio got most famous in WWE, but even then, like he's still huge everywhere, and I don't think they would care if he wrestled anywhere else.
Yeah, but Ray was like, I was making a point to somebody how like WWE needs Ray more than Ray needs WWE, because when Ray left WWE. And he went to AAA. AAA had a little boom there when you had that World Cup where you had, it was a really nice time, and he was dressing up like the Terminator because he had that Terminator thing.
That was great.
So Terminator wanted to work with AAA to get that on him, to get to work with Rey Mysterio and have that and have that thing, and then they did the Mission Impossible deal, I think too. And it was right around that Rey Mysterio in the thing, right? And then he did Lucha Underground, and Lucha Underground was awesome, and he was there with them, and that was and he had a nice thing there. And then he was in the main event of All In.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a marquee name anywhere he goes. No matter where he goes in the world, no matter what promotion, he's instantly main event. That's his level of status and his caliber as a wrestler to this day. Like, people are as excited as they were, 25 years ago to see Rey Mysterio. And it's crazy that his popularity has increased over the years like that.
And that is one thing that is true in Mexico, America, Japan, everywhere, is if you were able to be that big of a draw, that is what makes you main event potential. Not
absolutely
not anything else, not seniority in the company, not the amount of dollars that you asked for on your contract signing. It's how much that they think that they can use you to draw eyes to their product.
Absolutely.
And he went to New Japan too.
He had that amazing lion with the New Japan lion. That was incredible.
Well, I think though too, it's more to a point. You're like, again, culturally, there's a different shift in the United States. That you have more of these promotions at war. Not war, but they're in competition with each other,
Absolutely.
and it's still happening in Mexico as well. But it's more of a general understanding that this is the progression of someone's careers. That it's much more acceptable to work with multiple promotions at different times of your career, and almost that the promotions kind of rely on that, understanding that you have to kind of grow within other promotions in order to get to that marquee level. And even sharing and utilizing talent is a lot more common in Mexico than it is in the United States. And I don't know if that's just more of a much more of a cultural thing here in the United States, of people being exclusive to promotions and that inter-promotion type of work being a bit more rare, or even within the United States, that you'll see it more common of U.S. promotions partnering with international promotion instead of co-promoting within the United States. I think too it's a big shift in mindset and cultural acceptance, and even just the career flow is viewed very differently in the U.S. because of the goal is to get to WWE and that's it. And I think in Mexico it's more just set, whether it's exploring and working with different promotions or hitting different career peaks or getting to the US or other countries. I feel like goal setting there too is structured very differently.
Yeah, it's absolutely different. And although I don't know. Yeah, it's absolutely, you just don't see that in the United States anymore, especially when we had the kind of regionalism in the indies. You'd see people hop around, but that with WWE, that's ended. People are kind of brand loyal, and
well, some of that is enforced brand loyalty, as the stories that are going around right now are firmly reminding people. It's been no secret for some time, but it's definitely everyone is more aware that loyalty is required.
Yeah.
One thing about Gory Guerrero and his impact is that I think I'd read that he brought some of that like pun intended gory style on the blood matches, lucha that he had gotten from some of the Texas stuff. And then that led to a lot of the bloodbath wrestling and toreo that everybody loves and adores. Toreo, people used to really, that was a real, and that was, I think a lot of influence of lucha was from Gory's work in, when he was real young down there.
Yes,
absolutely.
I constantly try and describe kind of the differences I feel between like Texas Lucha Libre and like California, other type of West Coast, because it's very, very different. So you make such a good point too about that
It's
more
true.
brutal side. It's still ingrained with Texas style wrestling, which I feel like is like more on the mat driven, more hardcore, more rough and tumble style, where I think California really loved that high flying, fast paced type of aerial work. And not to say that they can be mutually exclusive. I mean, of course, but that's just my sense of
that's the generalization. Absolutely.
So that makes a lot of sense. And that too is its own element of Lucha Libre, kind of that subtext in there as well, that has become very popular and well known throughout the world, is kind of the brutality of it. And that's some really interesting insight too about Gory, because I think that, again, to me it was really inventing some movesets that now are part of just the standard staples of wrestling and in any format. And I think that in and of itself is contribution enough, but just the lineage of trainers and performers and everyone that's come through that lineage and legacy, and then branching out to all of those people that it's impacted. I mean, it is, I don't think Lucha Libre would even look the same, not only because of the presence of Eddie, but just the entire lineage of the Guerrero family. We wouldn't be, I don't even, obviously, I don't know if we'd even be that popular because of just the ripple and waves of it. Of course, in the U.S. culture because of Eddie, but I think with the training and the skill set that they've been passed on to everybody else, and even just their ability to wrestle where they did. I think that too. We'd have such a different conversation if it wasn't for that family.
So here's a question. Had Chavo and Mando not gone everywhere and wrestled everyone, right, from like Roddy Piper, they were all over the place, right?
They really were, yeah.
Years before Eddie, Mando and Chavo were out wrestling everybody and everyone on the mid card and above, right? Had they not done that, when Eddie came around, would the people have been? Would his talent, his coworkers, the other talent, have been so open to this kid doing all this lucha stuff? If he didn't come from that kind of lineage, where if he didn't have that name, if he was just some random guy trying to do all these new moves, if he wasn't a guerrero, if they didn't know that his brothers had done all this work, if they didn't know where he had come from, would they have been so open to that stuff, or would they have shut him down as this kid's weird? This isn't gonna work.
I think
based on the timing, I would say they probably would have been a little more open to it, because what happened was Eddie didn't do a lot of lucha before he went to Mexico, and he brought lucha back with him when he came back, and that was when lucha was starting to be a bigger export. He got big in Mexico and brought that back, so people were like, okay, this is what he did to get him famous, let's work with him a little bit. That's what the ECW matches were all about. Was Paul Heyman was trying to bring in what he thought was going to be the next big thing. And that's why he brought in Eddie and Ray and Psicosis. So based on the timing, I would say that yes. But had there not also been like a peso devaluation at the time, we may not have seen that. He might not have even left Mexico, and people wouldn't have necessarily seen lucha as the next big thing.
I think I know what you mean, though, Jerry. I think maybe the career trajectory would have looked different. I think having the name and his brothers already come to the U.S. and wrestle helped his credibility, because that's, again, the lineage is all about who trained you, who are you from. And so the fact that his brothers did a lot of that legwork, and, a lot of people already liked them and knew that they were reliable wrestlers, that I think it helped pave the path for him a little quicker. And so he could have those opportunities, and that way the career trajectory happened the way that it did. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that it would have been as far as maybe less acceptable, but I think that he was able to do a lot in the time frame that he had, because his brothers had already had that presence here, and people felt comfortable giving him those opportunities because they knew, you're a Guerrero, we know that you can deliver.
Absolutely.
So to that point, on what I was saying, Eddie was already moving up higher and faster than the other guys I was talking about. So they absolutely knew, particularly Hector, who had a really good reputation for being a safe worker from everybody I've talked to, that if he's related to the Guerreros, then there's something that is worth working with there for sure.
Yeah, they were already a well-respected name, and as trainers, I believe it was Mando that even the WoW, women, like he had done
Glow. He trained the Glow ladies.
Yeah, and he trained all of them. So like when they looked for a wrestling trainer, that's who they got. So they were already well respected, and so I think that name recognition coming with them can't be undervalued when he would say, "Let's try this. I got this idea," or let me show you this new thing. You know what I mean? Like I think that came with all of that. That the whole family was known to be great wrestlers. They had developed an excellent reputation with other wrestlers and in the wrestling community, and so I think that has to be considered with his trajectory.
Yeah, because they weren't just a sideshow, which sometimes wrestling can be a sideshow business, right? And now the lucha talent, right? And with him, he had that pedigree, so he couldn't just be he bring the lucha style to the real the big show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I have an interesting perspective on this next question, or just an interesting kind of question to ask. I think this will get us thinking. We've talked about the past, but I want us to look forward into the future. So anyone within Lucha Libre now, who do we think could be on the Mount Rushmore of Lucha Libre in the next 10, 20, years in the future, who do we think has the potential to get up to the Mount Rushmore?
We have to mention Penta, right? Like,
Yeah.
He's like the number one guy right now, I think, that most likely be the next Lucha guy, to be of massive influence. We've seen his potential. He's starting to get to display that on AEW in front of a national audience. That last match, especially, people have seen what they can do and what Lucha Libre can be. And we mentioned that with Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero too, but Penta and Phoenix, they're expanding people's idea of what Lucha Libre can be in an international context, in an American wrestling context. And it's not just flips and, acrobatics and entertainment, because some people have gotten conditioned to that idea. But when you see Penta, like, it's so much more. He's got such a brutal martial arts style. Moveset, it's just different, like he's just a different guy. His mannerisms, his personality, his, everything, the way he does everything is so special and so unique. And he has that je ne sais quoi that you just have to have, that undefinable element. Penta has that. He's the guy for me.
I think I'm with you. I just had an interesting revelation on this, though. The Lucha Brothers are kind of the physical embodiment of what we were talking about between the California style of Lucha Libre and the Texas style of Lucha
Libre. Very true. Yes.
So now when you're trying to explain to people, you can use those two as your benchmarks.
Got it. Good analogy. I appreciate that.
I like that.
Yeah. What about you, Jerry? Do you have any kind of thoughts on who do you think could be the future Mount Rushmore of Lucha Libre?
Sure. So you could go with in terms of Mexico, right? If you want to keep it not keep it, but if you want to take into account like impact in Mexico, I think the guy is Rush.
Yeah, I see that.
Young, and I think he can fill up Arena Mexico. He's got a ton of charisma. Yeah, so I think Rush is a guy on the Mexico side that can that's on his way, that could make it, that could do something. He already done so much, right? So just keep it up and keep filling up arenas, and if he, it's really just the money stopping him. But that feud against LA Park, that's supposed to happen. That's supposed to happen. If that ever happens, that would kind of cement it. So I think Rush is the guy. I think on the US side, I think Angel Garza is tremendous because he has the TV charisma, he has the TV experience, he's got all the in-ring talent. So I think there's nothing stopping him from doing whatever he wants, talent-wise. And then you got and those are kind of easier because they're great, like rudos, like they're great. On the high flyer side, everybody's so good, So whether you go with
really.
You go with Phoenix. You go with there's a lot of really great talent, right? It's a little bit harder on the technical side, but yeah, I think I'd throw Rush and Garza on there.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that's already been said. I mean, Penta was the first one that came to mind, but Jerry too, as you were talking about Angel, and a lot of this is going to depend on how this gets handled. But Santos, really with the legacy of being Hijo de Fantasma and El Fantasma, that lineage, but also if they keep doing this right, then I could see his career trajectory really being well on the either Raw or SmackDown. I think it's being held and done so well in NXT because it's such a good storytelling and cultural recognition, but it also longevity. It could truly be another kind of Rey Mysterio type of expression of Lucha Libre, where it is more looked at as such a positive thing and not a gimmick. But that. If they do that and they do go kind of the gimmicky side, then it's all lost and it's for nothing. But that's to me where I feel like it could go. I don't know. Like there's potential. I see it. Keep on going with it. But if it goes through a wrong turn, I don't think there's going to be a recovery period from that. But I also have to agree. Rush is just like I think too, again, that crossover appeal with Ring of Honor, and now that has really turned Ring of Honor on its head with, you know, such a really strong Lucha Libre influence and presence on that roster. That, you know, I think is also almost like a coming of age for Ring of Honor and an evolution for Ring of Honor, who's already had such a strong delivery of technical wrestling, and now they're still able to do that, but with just a different set of people. And it's, again, I think an evolution that Ring of Honor needed to have, because they couldn't keep relying on the same format of storytelling, especially if all these great wrestlers kept going away to bigger companies. I think Lucha Libre for them is an important aspect of the future. They really need to evaluate if their goal as a company is to continue to produce quality pro wrestling and focus that and their talent and the performers. I think they have that in Lucha Libre and with the stars that they have. And Rush is just one of those people. But again, too, is bringing that crossover to American audiences. And I think getting American audiences excited about Lucha Libre. So that too, I mean, since we've already mentioned that with Ray and Eddie, and even again El Santo, just culturally, that is the recognition. I think Rush could absolutely be in that conversation in the future.
I think Laredo Kid is another guy that could be up there. The two best. He's been in both of the, you know, the top two matches I've seen in AAA this year. He was in both of them. He was the common element. He's gonna wrestle Kenny Omega for the AAA Mega Campeon Championship, and so I think he's getting ready to cross that next level. He's tremendous, and if he can back it up with getting enough eyes on the talent is absolutely there. And so I think somebody like Laredo Kid is easily going to be a big deal, maybe the next big deal, depending where he goes.
Yeah. So when the question came up, the first person that came immediately springing to mind was Angel Garza. I also have the same dads that Miranda does. If he's not used properly in the company he's in right now, then it's going to stymie his growth in the same way that we're seeing with other luchadors that are struggling in that company right now. Mm-hmm. And then I'd also thought of both of the Lucha Bros. I mean, obviously they're easy picks for they're going to do something big in the near future.
Absolutely.
But when Jerry was talking about it's hard to pick the high flyers, for me, one actually does stand out. I think Hio de Vikingo is a big standout for a Technico and a high flyer, and I think that he could very well reach to the potential that he has, because he's on track to do it right now.
Oh, absolutely. He is tremendous, and he gets it. He's got that same thing. He's just got it, and that star factor. Yeah.
And he's able right now to do things that nobody's seen, which draws
absolutely
eyes to him regardless of the it factor. But then you add in that he's got an in-ring charisma, and you don't really want to see bad things happen to him. So, I think that will be a good matchup. Like, honestly, like him and Rush would be an earth-shattering match at this point.
I'd love that. Yeah, that'd be so good.
We missed one.
Oh,
PWG Bola winner Bandido.
Yes. See, that's why we have to have these conversations, because then we realize who we missed. That's exactly why we're doing this. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
You look at the guys that have won Bola and what they've gone and done, and now Bandido did it, and he's he got voted into the main event or one of the for the anniversary show at CMLL, so he's beloved there. He was all in the main event of All In, the first one, so he's respected by his by the other talent. I think he's another guy that's up there. He's right up there at the top.
Yeah. You can't underestimate the fact that the other talent has so much respect for him.
Absolutely.
That is a truly telling thing, that people that work with him have nothing but good things to say about their expectations of him, their time working with him. Like, that's hugely telling.
Yes. I mean, I think that's why this hasn't been done before, because it's so hard to pick all of the people. I mean, like I said, we had, of course, the standards, and then that third and fourth spot kind of fluctuated around. And then when you think about people that you missed out, you think about promoters, you think about people who've helped bring other people into the business. And then you also think about the future of Lucha Libre and who could be rising up and getting to these points where, you know, they'll be in these conversations in the next 10 to 20 years. Because as we've seen too, I mean, one, we're getting into a much different landscape with wrestling in general, but with Lucha Libre and a wider audience that it's reaching. Your perspective as far as your fandom of Lucha Libre and you know, what are you looking for out of your Mount Rushmore? And, you know, the contributions are going to vary, whether it's masks and design. Is it, you know, crossover to audiences from different parts of the world? Is it, you know, contributions to the style of wrestling? Is it character? Is it going to be, you know, social media presence? And merchandising that ends up, you know, being a part of the conversation. You know, I think all those variables make it that much more interesting and challenging. The number of promotions they've worked for, the promotions that they've worked for, championships held. You know, I think that too is an interesting kind of conversation where, you know, I think as Jerry mentioned too, a lot of these in when you talk about traditional Mount Rushmore of kind of U.S. wrestlers, a lot of it's by, you know, how many championships they've held, which championships they've held. And I think in this too, we haven't talked about that at all, because it doesn't seem like that not necessarily is a vital aspect in the decision-making process. You know, they've won championships, and so like Jerry said, because they've worked with all different types of promotions, they've held tons of championships as well. So even the amount doesn't seem to be a deciding factor for any of us. It's really, you know, what they've contributed and what they've done, and, you know, what we just talked about, what they will do.
I couldn't tell you without going on to Google at the number of championships any of the people we've talked about today have held.
I couldn't either.
No, I don't know.
I'm pretty sure Miranda Morales is still champion of like 3 promotions.
It's true. That's true.
Oh, probably.
Yeah, he was still wrestling last year in Japan. Like, he's wrestled in the last 18 months or so.
Yeah.
I shot him. I shot one of his matches in like 2016 or 17. It's a couple years ago, and you got a WWE legend in the ring in the main event.
Yeah.
So quick game. Let's fill out there's 4 of us. So let's fill out a Mount Rushmore live quickly but based only on mask designs.
Oh.
Specifically only based on like your favorite mask design.
My favorite mask design.
So you can give one, and then you can give an honorable mention if you want, but just based solely on your favorite masks. Just the design, not on the
Guerrero Maya Jr.
What's that?
Guerrero Maya Jr.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, my favorite is Jushin Liger. Something about that mask is just so... He's the first guy I really remember as a masked wrestler as a kid, and that mask just stands out to me. Ultimo Dragon, you know, has such an iconic mask. That was the first mask I ever bought, so that's one of my favorites. The Urban Aztec, Jesse Hernandez, he designed the Lince Dorado mask. That's one of my most favorite masks of all time.
He also did one of the designs
Dr.
for Guerrero
Wagner.
Maya Jr.
Yeah.
And Dr. Wagner Jr. So
yeah, he's done a lot that were stunning. Yeah.
Wagner. So that's another Urban Aztec. It's all 3 of us.
Yeah.
How about you, Miranda? Which one's yours?
I would say probably my pick would be Rey Mysterio. Especially, I love how he's incorporating kind of more like designer aspects in it, just as like a designer type of person. Like, I just loved that kind of bougie it up. Like, I'm all for that, because that too is like very interesting now too, when you have more of these designer influences into it, because then it becomes a part of fashion, which is like that. I mean, there's this whole, you know, the Marvel AAA fashion line coming out. Like, that is a dream for me. Like, a love of Lucha Libre and comics and fashion. Like, yes. How much do I pay? Where do I get it from? Like, to me, I love that blend and integration, just me personally, and La Parca. I just love the whole. I think the mask itself really helped with the entire look and the entire gimmick. But for some reason, just the skeleton face outline and even the back hood, that I really liked. It was just always that's for me as a kid growing up, the mask that I remember more than Mysterio's is La Parca's.
Yeah. My honorable mention would go to Blue Demon, honestly.
Yeah. He's iconic.
It's just iconic, and when I think of what a classic older mask, that's the one that I go to.
Well, and it's been repeated. Like that style kind of became so influential. Like even Ramses and Nacho Libre, he had the gold version of the Blue Demon mask. And so like it's still very influential in an odd way to this day. And you see it. I mean, like its ubiquity cannot be denied.
That's true. Jerry, you were starting to say something. I'm sorry.
No, that was it. As Demon's also my.
We were on the same wavelength. I should have just let you say it.
It's like the quintessential lucha mask, I think, is the theme because it's so simple. It's at the so like it's simple, but it's everything you want in a lucha mask. So that was mine too. Of honorable mention. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I literally could go on with where there's masks, whether it's the subsets of rules, of technicals. I mean, like that's I think the beauty of these types of conversations is that as you roll into them, you start to notice all these little details and things that stick with you as a Lucha Libre fans, and I think that's a huge testament to the entirety of this segment of wrestling, but also too, I mean, it's history is deep. Everything about it, it's so integral. It is just beyond what happens in the ring. It's family, it's the looks, it's the training, it's all of it, and that makes it so vast. So then it makes me feel overwhelmed. Like, how are we ever going to? How is this ever? No wonder this has not been tackled. Now I just keep thinking this in my head. No wonder this is uncharted territory, gentlemen. That's why. But someone has to do it. Someone has to go through these conversations and let the people know, so that way they can, decide and come up with their own lists.
For sure.
So real quick too, we kind of was talking about a new story that kind of developed over the past week or so, and I wanted the chance to talk about it in this format because this is the Lucha Central Weekly podcast, and so of course we wouldn't be doing this without giving you some news for the week. Gentlemen, I hope you're okay with that. Kind of just throwing that out there.
No, that's great.
Because also, that's our guest, Jerrry Villagrana. He's the one who kind of shared this with us. And so I'd be happy to kind of talk more about it and kind of get, of course, Jerry's perspective, but also the team's perspective. Jerry, would you mind kind of sharing with our listeners more about this news story that kind of developed, or at least what you found as far as, I think it started on social media and has kind of grown into a news story?
Yeah, so it's going to be the biggest story this week, and it was about Pirata Morgan. He went on, I think it was an interview. It was on an interview, and they want to get information, right? And so he came out and he started saying, some details about payment and kind of some of it was like in kayfabe and out of kayfabe about how much you get paid if you win like a hair match, or how much if you win and lose a title match. And it's kind of like a big somewhat of a no-no, right? Like I remember another photographer friend of mine from down there was sharing like some of the rules of how to be a luchador, and one of them is like don't speak, there's certain things you just can't say. And I think Morgan kind of crossed that line a little bit. And it's one thing for somebody who's like like maybe newer, or they're out of the business a little bit, or they don't have that kind of trajectory to kind of break the fourth wall. But when somebody as respected and with that kind of a career does it, it really shakes things up, right? Because people can't just say, "Oh, yeah, people don't respect the business these days," and kind of like kids these days. Yeah, they can't. You can't just kids these days beat up Morgan,
Yeah, it's true.
Yes, it was a really wild story, and he'll be on Mesa de los Margaros on Wednesday. So if people want to tune into that,
Excellent.
I just saw that today. So Mesa de los Margaros is a Lucha Central video cast.
Yes.
On Wednesday.
Yeah.
So he's going to be on there to, yeah. So that'll be fun. So if people want to watch that, he'll be on there.
I'm excited now. We used to have a really robust Lucha Central, which got me really pumped, and I would make notes on which shows I needed to listen to live and which ones I'd go back to later. And now, it's all guesswork, and so I'm excited to hear that one live. It's great.
Yeah, you have to do he'll have some splaining to do for sure.
Yes, I was gonna say Los Mesas de los Magaros. I mean, that's gonna be pretty exclusive to be one of the first casts to kind of ask him about that, because that, like you said, is a tradition, you don't break, and for him to do that, I'd be very interested in finding out maybe what compelled him, what made him, what made him want to share that information or feel right sharing it. And was it just just him kind of off the cuff, or was there more of an explanation behind that? And also, as we kind of discussed off air too, I think like that is also a testament to how Lucha Libre is treated in Mexico as very much like a very real sport, and the way that interviews and press and content is treated is very much similar to interviewing anyone in any other sports roles too. So I think that's probably why I got a lot of that momentum, is how seriously it's treated in a journalistic aspect.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things that he talked about was how a match he had with Hector Garza, which is Angel Garza's uncle, and WCW, I think, and TNA, he worked for them too. This is amazing talent. He passed away way too soon. But it's about a match that they had and how much they got paid if they won. It was a championship match, and he said that the promoter offered him to an additional 50,000 pesos or something crazy to let Hector Garza win. And so Angel Garza posted on the social media about it, like, my uncle would have beat your ass. It was amazing talent, so he's like, he was not going to stand for that. Like, my uncle would have beat your ass.
The interesting thing was that Pirata had actually named like dollar amount or peso amounts, how much the payoffs were for an Apuestas match, a title match. And then he was like, that's why these guys, they throw the Apuestas match, they lose on purpose so they get the big payoff. And so it was really weird. And that's
a
lot of fallout from this. I think it'll be interesting to see what he says this week on podcast. I'm excited.
I mean, because I'm sorry, it just still blows me away.
No, keep going.
It's a huge story. It's really, but it's good. I mean, it's good to have stories. It's good to have people talking about lucha. It's always a good thing. So he kind of threw something under the bus, but hey, at least we got something to talk about. Because times are tough, and there's not enough lucha right now. So
But speaking of that, since we're doing some news stories, Miranda, you were actually involved, not just announcing, you were kind of involved in a match this week.
Yes. So I announced for the Future Stars of Women's Wrestling in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is part of Future Stars of Wrestling. And it was an all-women show, and I got to announce for CMLL star Estrellita, who wrestled former WWE and Impact star Katarina. So that was amazing to announce for her, and also just see that match live, because really, I mean, Estrellita just put in such amazing work with Katarina too. Is again very different styles and locations. Katarina from the UK, Estrellita from Mexico, and she really just highlighted her skill set, jumping over the ropes, real technical arm work that she did, and just really fun loving and easygoing too. The crowd just loved her, and I think that too is those small examples that you have, those opportunities when you do have either mixed style matches or lucha libre matches. in American audiences, and with women's matches as well. I think that gets fans really excited to see something brand new. But her attitude and her glow was just really infectious, and it was just so much fun. Like the fact that I just got to announce her into the ring was a huge dream. I just kept thinking, I'm really going to be announcing for Estrellita.
He's in the cookbook.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Well then,
call back to the cookbook, but Estrellita has a couple recipes in there.
What? Now I should have. I'll next time if I ever see her again, I'll ask her about the cookbook. Sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. But yeah.
A funny story about Estrellita. She came up and did a match in Saltillo, where I used to live in Mexico, and so I was doing photography for her, and I'm a big proponent of lucha. Like I love lucha. Like I was working as an engineer down there, and lucha is like a thing of the people. Like people call it like Teatro del Pueblo, like general people. It's not like a thing that like very rich people would go to or anything. So a lot of my engineer friends were like, "Oh, lucha." And I was like, no, I love lucha. So I would always go. And so one day I invited my pastor at the church, and he's an American guy that had a church in Mexico. And so I invited him and his family to come and see lucha because I love lucha and I wanted to share my love for lucha. So, so they come to the show and everything's going great. It's a great wrestling show. They're loving it. And then Estrellita comes out, but she comes out like a schoolgirl.
Yep, that's how she came out.
It's tiny little clothes and just all kinds of lucha antics. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my pastor is like right there. And you got the schoolgirl coming out in the very small outfit, and it was a lot of fun.
How did your pastor take it though? Your pastor enjoyed the show, or did you have to put blinds on him and be like, "Don't watch this"? Cover his eyes, just peek a little bit.
Yeah, because you know how Mexico is, right? They do, they all kinds of fun, and they're less on the feminist. They're not as feminist. That movement hasn't hit as hard in Mexico as it has. They're still doing some more. I don't know, not vulgar, but
maybe playful,
exotic.
Playful, flirty.
Because that's exactly what I think of when I see Estrellita. It's more playful, maybe a little bit flirty, but I think it's more of a playful, youthful type of. I don't think it's meant to be, exotic or sexual or anything. Like I just think of this is just someone who's very happy-go-lucky and just is easygoing and playful, and that too is kind of how she projects that in the ring too with some of her moves and the dancing. It's just playful.
For sure. Yeah, but that was a fun time.
So cool.
Yeah, well, I can't believe we did it. I mean, we tackled the Mount Rushmore of Lucha Libre, multiple actually, with also our Lucha Libre mask design Mount Rushmore contributions, talking about the future of Lucha Libre, and even a few news stories. So thank you very much, Jerry, for joining us on this week's special edition of the Lucha Central Weekly podcast. For our listeners, can you let our fans know where they can find you on social media, about your podcast, anything and everything you want to plug?
Sure. I'll go first. So I'm JVDA Photography. If you want to go jvdaphotography.com, you can go to my wrestling page. It's /wrestling on there. A ton of lucha pictures. On Instagram, JVDA Photography. On Facebook, same thing. You can dig back a ton of great lucha albums from Monterrey, Mexico City, different promotions. So I work for AAA, CMLL down there. Chaos, Crash. So the JVD Photography everywhere, and then just look out for all the Master Public, all the great Master Public content. A lot of stuff coming out, a lot of fun gifts, a lot of great merch. There's shirts at Hot Topic, there's shirts at Pro Wrestling Tees. Get all your great lucha gear through them because they work really hard and try and get the message out of the good stuff that's happening.
The socks are out just in time for Christmas too.
For sure.
Yeah.
Brendan, where can our listeners find you?
I am 321 T-shirt guy. I am on Facebook. It's 321 and then T-shirt guy is spelled out. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and the Twitters, which, as usual, I'm still trolling right now. I would like to give a shout out to Coastal Championship Wrestling, who submitted some stuff for me to watch for the Indie Roundup. So be listening in the near future for us to talk about their matches as well. There's a lot of good stuff to be talking about there.
Fantastic. Yes, the call has been answered. So really excited that we'll be highlighting some U.S. indie promotions in upcoming episodes. Dusty, where can our listeners find you?
I am on Facebook at facebook.com/Dusty Murphy, and I am on Instagram at Dusty Murphy.
And me, Miranda Morales, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at the #Miranda, hashtag spelled out. And of course, well, you just got to go to luchacentral.com, which is your centralized place for all things Lucha Libre. You can find articles, reviews of events, of course, summaries of what's happening throughout the week of Lucha Libre, including reviews of Raw, SmackDown, AEW Dynamite, and Dark. And of course, special pay-per-view events that come up. IWRG is also posted up there. And of course, there's videos and interviews that you can find on the Lucha Central YouTube page. You can follow Lucha Central at Lucha Central on Instagram and Facebook, and at Lucha Central.com on Twitter. So we got you covered. Just go to all those places, everything that we just said. So that way you can stay up to date on everything that's happening throughout the world of Lucha Libre. And again, a huge thank you to Jerrry Villagrana for being our special guest this week, joining us again. We love having you on the show. Your insights, your history, everything that you know, again, it comes to us just as a great source of information, but also insight and just a lot of fun stories. If you want to get some cool, fun stories, go to Jerry, because he has them. So a big thank you to you, Jerry. A big thank you to all of you who are listening. This is our Thanksgiving week episode, so make sure you all are being safe. Hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving, however you're spending it, whether you're doing it remotely with friends and family, ordering Chinese food, making your own food, whatever that may be. Make sure that you are enjoying yourselves. And we are thankful for all of you who are listening, who send us information, who let us know what you think about the show. Thank you so much to our listeners and fans. And don't forget that this podcast is also available on streaming platforms like Podbay, Speaker, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, all of the above. You can find that. But again, luchacentral.com. That is your source for all things Lucha Libre. I'm Miranda Morales for Jerry, Dusty, and Brendan. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will be back next week. And now to stop. We'll edit this part later.
Okay.
Or you can just leave it in.
I know this is the fun parts afterwards.
Yeah, like at the end of Smokey and the Bandit, where you see all the clips. Yeah.
Or a Jackie Chan movie where you see all the accidents.
Yeah.
Stop talking about my life, Brendan. Gosh. I feel attacked. All right.
It's what you get for talking about Lucha Libre and food and saying that we all want that. Because
well, is that not the truth?
That's true.
It's probably pretty true. It's definitely true.